teenage kid, the biggest source of stress is parents.
There are different distinct parenting styles which exist.
वो तो एकदम ज्ञान हो गया कि यार ये तो
हाँ.
बैलेंस होना चाहिए, but where is that balance?
What do you mean by supportive or unsupportive? I don't think any parent will say कि I am unsupportive or would like to be unsupportive.
In our surveys with test prep students, for example, the single biggest source of their stress is parental expectations.
Given that Manchav, you are now a parent of a 19-year-old and now you are in the area, so what are your 2-3 tips for parents of to-be teens or young teens? What do you see most of the parents faltering in today?
So तू बता, मतलब you're ahead of the curve. So just to put it in perspective.
So one of the things that we have been learning as through our own experiences, and now we conduct as part of PeakMind some sessions for parents also, basically helping them discover their own parenting style. There are 4-5 different distinct parenting styles which exist, kind of collated through research. Once you see them, you will be able to put yourself in one of those buckets. Almost everyone around you, you will be able to put them in one of those buckets. So these are 4 broad parenting types. They are fairly self-explanatory if you see. And it's not key any of them is right or wrong. The authoritative is what people say is the most desirable state. In wanting to be authoritative, a lot of people end up being authoritarian, is where that boundary shifts to slight negative.
So what's
If,
good? Is this a single linear scale on
नहीं,
that the left is good and right is bad, or the right is good and the left is bad?
हाँ मतलब if you look at it, leftmost is the most desirable state to be in.
Is it? Okay.
Okay, where you are helping the child grow sufficiently and still be supportive, have clear rules and so on.
Mancha, just curious on this point. Supportive is a very interesting, because again I struggle. What is everybody thinks they're supportive. I think it's, what do you mean by supportive or unsupportive? I don't think any parent will say कि I am unsupportive or would like to be unsupportive. I'll put it this way. So what exactly?
So-
can you give an example?
It's difficult to explain. A way to look at it is how much are you helping the child be? The child, they are wanting to be something, you are supporting them to be that, versus you are not even kind of wanting to understand what the child really wants, you are telling them what they should be. I think that's the broad difference between
So is
being
this
supportive.
supportive not from a parent's perspective, but from what the child thinks?
So there is basically being able to guide the child versus being able to kind of impose on the child.
So I'll give you an example. There's a
Mhm.
parent who thinks, actually there are two parents. Both parents thinks, like he was saying, कि हम supportive हैं.
Mhm.
One parent is being supportive by actually guiding the child कि ये करो, ये करो, ये करो, ये करो, ये. The other person thinks कि I'm being supportive. The child कि बेटा टीवी देख लो, जो करना है करो. I'm being supportive of you. Who is being more
No, no.
supportive?
So that is what will come in the permissive or uninvolved category.
Right.
So this basically helps understand ki what each of these behaviors, what is the impact it has on the child.
And so basically, the uninvolved is has the lowest involved, of course, but authoritarian is, so it's like a bell curve, right? Is that what you're trying to say here, or differently?
I suspect if you ask most of the teenage kids what parenting style they would want uninvolved. This would be their choice.
I know.
From a child's perspective.
See, which is why I was asking that. I think even from a child's perspective, it depends on the age of the child.
Yeah.
So if you have children
ask
in the
my
age
daughter-
of 15, 16, 17, then they absolutely want uninvolved.
Correct. But what happens is if you have grown in that environment, so for example, in an authoritative environment, then you have already developed those habits. So I'll give an example. One of my son's friends, he is so particular कि if he tells his parents that I'll be back at 8 o'clock, he will be back at 8 o'clock. Whereas there are others, including my son, he says I'll be back at 8 o'clock.
तू
It is,
अपने हिसाब से
very
बोल रहा है कि
flexible.
यार मेरा बेटा नहीं आता है, और तू उसको एग्जाम्पल आई एम श्योर देता है कि वो देखो वो वाला शर्मा जी का लड़का आता है वापस 8 o'clock.
हाँ, शर्मा जी का लड़का आता है, right? But what I'm saying is, I, if that behavior starts now when the child is 15, 16, it can't happen. That this behavior is kind of what the child grows up in.
So tell me, actually, what's your learning for parents like us, like Ashish? His kids are teenagers. My kids are about to be teenagers. Some people say whatever they grow up, they will believe that when they are teenagers. And some people say that अभी अगर इतना structure डालोगे, those are the people जो सबसे ज्यादा rebel.
हाँ,
What
so
does
it
your
has to be a balance, right?
नहीं वो तो एकदम ज्ञान हो गया कि यार ये तो
हाँ,
बैलेंस होना चाहिए, बट वेट इज दैट बैलेंस?
see, it obviously varies family to family, but what we have seen in the formative years, early years हैं 3 to 10, 12 type का age जो है, that is where you kind of set the mold for the person. There is respect for rules, there is uh, sufficient awareness to the child that they are loved and valued no matter what happens,
3
and
to
so
8,
on.
right?
3 to 12 is kind of the outer limit before they get into teenagers. But yeah, 3 to 10 is the broad spectrum. Below 3 is like कुछ ऐसे याद नहीं रहता. And the broad idea of knowing this is just to understand what your own behavior is and be able to suitably change that. So one of the things which we saw, for example, working with parents of test prep students, right? They are trying to be helpful, but at the same time, in trying to be helpful, they are actually ending up harming the child, and they don't even realize it till it kind of gets pointed out to them, because up to a certain degree that you can push the child, there's a certain optimum degree of stress that you should create, not beyond that. Sometimes you end up having a lot of wrong comparisons, again, which pushes people in a different direction, not understanding what the child is going through or dealing with, continuing to go down your path is again something which ends up happening. So in our surveys with test prep students, for example, the single biggest source of their stress is parental expectations.
बट यार इसके लिए सर्वे करने की क्या जरूरत थी? मतलब वी ऑल नो फ्रॉम आवर चाइल्डहुड, मोस्ट ऑफ यू नो, आई विल probably very soon know, is that teenage kids, the biggest source of stress is parents.
No.
So what does that add more value?
So this was more on the among the test prep students जो कॉम्पिटिटिव एग्जाम जर्नी में हैं, उनके स्ट्रेस लेवल्स अलग हैं as compared to normal teenagers. What we have seen, there is 3 to 4x higher propensity of what is clinically stressed among the test prep students compared to teenagers who are not in that journey. Within that, one of the major stress factors is managing expectations.
I have a
So
sense
those expectations can be from
this-
parents, they could be from teachers, from society, or wherever. That's one of the biggest things that they deal with.